In this video, I want to dive into a hot take about Charlotte Flair that may upset some people. When it comes to Charlotte, there's already a built-in animosity that creates a split among WWE fans. You've got your Charlotte Flair supporters, and then you've got those who just can't stand her. Some argue that she's overrated, others believe she's underrated, and there are plenty of people who feel like WWE pushes her down our throats endlessly. I get it. I've been covering pro wrestling professionally for over a decade, so I've watched Charlotte Flair's rise from her early days in NXT to her time on the main roster. I've seen it all. Charlotte's journey began when she was called up from NXT along with 3 other members of the 4 Horsewomen: Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, and Bayley, who would go on to transform the women's division. Charlotte quickly made her mark, not just because of her last name but because she was a talented in-ring performer. She made her debut as a part of the Divas division, donning the role of Ric Flair's daughter, with a glittery, almost cartoonish face paint that mirrored her father's iconic look. But that wasn't the end of her story. She soon made history, debuting at WrestleMania 32 as the reigning Divas champion, and within a short time, she was a part of the monumental triple threat match that saw her, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch compete for the newly minted Women's Championship. Through the years, Charlotte has consistently won and lost championships, but the one thing that's never wavered is her status as one of the most prominent names in the business. We've seen Charlotte at the top of the card, both as a heel and as a babyface. As a heel, Charlotte has delivered some of the best promo work and character development in recent memory, but when it comes to portraying a babyface, well, let's just say it hasn't been as smooth of a transition. The truth is, Charlotte Flair has had to make the difficult switch between these two personas more times than many fans would prefer, but at the end of the day, her in-ring skills are undeniable, and her place in history is secure. Charlotte Flair will undoubtedly go down as one of the greatest in-ring workers of all time. Whether you love her or hate her, there's no denying her wrestling talent. She's one of the most polarizing figures in professional wrestling, and she'll be remembered as one of the most controversial and debated stars of the sport. If you believe that wrestling should be about athleticism, technical prowess, and pushing the limits of the sport, you're likely to be a fan of Charlotte Flair. If, however, you prefer a different style of wrestling or perhaps a different representation of what the business should look like, Charlotte might not be your favorite. Charlotte Flair's very presence is enough to stir up conversations, whether she's on television, competing in a match, or cutting a backstage promo. She's going to get people talking. This is something that few wrestlers in history have been able to consistently do. To be honest, there are only a handful of names that can command such attention: John Cena, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, The Rock, and a select few others. Charlotte Flair is undeniably one of those stars who can stir up conversations just by showing up. As Ric Flair himself has said, he's now known more as Charlotte Flair's father than as the Nature Boy, a comment that may seem tongue-in-cheek but actually speaks volumes about Charlotte's place in the industry. While Ric Flair is still an icon and a legend in the business, Charlotte is establishing her own legacy as a generational talent who may very well be on track to become the face of modern women's wrestling. In many ways, she's already reached that status. Charlotte Flair is, without a doubt, one of the greatest female wrestlers of all time, and if you compare her to some of the other top names in the women's division, she stands out as the top star of this generation. Some might argue that Trish Stratus still holds that distinction, and while it's true that Trish is undoubtedly one of the most influential women in the history of pro wrestling, I believe Charlotte Flair has surpassed her in terms of in-ring ability, match quality, and her influence on the business as a whole. Charlotte and Trish are often compared because they represent two different eras of women's wrestling. Trish Stratus made her mark in the early 2000s when women's wrestling was often reduced to short segments or eye-candy matches. Trish helped elevate women's wrestling during a time when it was largely overshadowed by the men's division. Her work during that period helped pave the way for future generations of female wrestlers. But Charlotte has taken the women's division to a whole new level. Not only has she headlined multiple major television shows, but she's also headlined pay-per-view events, something that Trish only did on a limited basis. More importantly, Charlotte was a part of the groundbreaking match at WrestleMania 35, where she, Becky Lynch, and Ronda Rousey became the first women to ever headline the event. That achievement alone cements Charlotte's place in history and solidifies her as the face of the modern women's wrestling era. Let's talk about the talent pool that Charlotte has had to work with. If you look back at Trish Stratus's prime, the talent depth was much thinner than it is today. There were fewer women who could go in the ring and who had the charisma to make it big. But in today's WWE, the women's roster is stacked with some of the best athletes, wrestlers, and performers in the world. The women's division has never been more competitive, and the level of talent has never been higher. From stars like Bianca Belair to Io Shirai, Rhea Ripley, and others, the women's division is firing on all cylinders, and Charlotte Flair is right there in the middle of it all, constantly working with and against the best of the best. There's no question that Charlotte is one of the top faces of this golden era of women's wrestling. She's at the forefront of this movement and is arguably one of the biggest draws in the entire company. Not only is she talented, but her star power is undeniable. When Charlotte is booked for a match or an appearance, people pay attention. That's a quality that only the true megastars possess. Just like John Cena or Roman Reigns, when Charlotte's name is mentioned, the engagement rates go up, ticket sales rise, social media interactions spike. This is the mark of a true megastar, and Charlotte Flair has proven time and time again that she is one of the biggest names in the business today. One thing that really sets Charlotte apart is her ability to work as a heel. She may not be as well loved as a babyface, but that's okay because Charlotte Flair is at her best when she's playing the villain. It's what she does best. When she's playing a heel, people either pay to see her win or pay to see her lose. And most of the time, it's more effective when fans are paying to see Charlotte get her comeuppance, rather than cheering her on as a babyface. History has shown us that the most successful version of Charlotte Flair is when she's working as a heel, whether it's her promos, her attitude, or her in-ring persona. Charlotte is just more believable and engaging as a bad guy. To put it simply, Charlotte Flair is a better heel than a babyface, and it's not even close. Look at her last run before her injury in December 2023, when she was working a match against Asuka. WWE tried to force Charlotte into a babyface role, but it just didn't work. The sympathy wasn't there, and the fans weren't buying into her as the hero. It's the same situation her father, Ric Flair, found himself in at times. Some wrestlers are just better suited to being heels, and Charlotte is one of them. When she's playing the bad guy, she's able to get more out of the crowd, and she works much better in that role. It's the same with other wrestlers, like The Miz or even people like Hulk Hogan at times. Some wrestlers are just naturally better at being heels, and Charlotte Flair is one of those people. You can't force it, you can't change it. She's one of those wrestlers whose true strength lies in being the villain. Ultimately, Charlotte Flair is one of the most captivating and divisive figures in professional wrestling today. Whether you love her or hate her, there's no denying her talent and her place in history. She's a megastar, a generational talent, and the face of modern women's wrestling. She's one of the few names in the industry that can still move the needle and make people care about what's happening on WWE television. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with me about Charlotte Flair being the greatest of all time in the women's division? Or do you think someone else deserves that title? Let's talk about it.